Hello, fellow Star Wars fans. My name is Star Raptor. Welcome to the channel. Saul Gerrera is back in live-action Star Wars. Forrest Whitaker is in Episode 8 of Andor Narkina 5 that came out this week. So in this video, it would only be right to dive into the vast history of the Rebel himself, going from the Clone Wars up until Rogue One. We're going to dive into all the stories that took place in both animation, video games, and everything else. So getting started with the Clone Wars, we were first introduced to this character on Onderon. At the end of the Clone Wars, we have Anakin Skywalker that ends up training these partisans, the early partisans, to fight against the Separatists. You have this crazy king on Onderon, and it was I believe, like a 4-episode arc, something like that. And of course, as soon as the Empire basically takes over from the Republic after Order 66, we have the Bad Batch premiere episode in which the Empire sees Saul as a threat. So the Republic transitions into the Empire, and right away they're cutting off their ties with some of these more extremist allies, which includes Saul Guerrera's people. So we see him interacting with the Bad Batch, and they do get out of there. Next up, we have a story featured in the excellent novel by James Luceno titled Rogue One Catalyst, and this one is a couple years after the events of Revenge of the Sith, and we have Saul Gerrera working in a capacity of sort of like a smuggler working with this Dracelian named Hasso Bit, and his buddy is, of course, Galen Erso, and they are having trouble on Coruscant as he is being forced to work for the Death Star program. So we have Galen Erso that wants to run away from the Empire, so he basically hails Saul Gerrera to get him off of Coruscant. So that's what that whole story is about. Next up, in video game form, we are currently 5 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith. We have Saul Gerrera that comes into contact with Cal Kestis, who happened to be on Kashyyyk, and Saul Gerrera's mission is to free the Wookiees. The Wookiees have been under intense slave labor for several years at this point, working on these different facilities. One of them is, of course, Tarful. So we have Cal Kestis, who's already seen the extremist kind of ideas of Saul Gerrera. Next up, this is from a adaptation of the Solo novel. This is Solo Expanded Edition, in which we see what happens with the coaxium that Han and Chewie delivered to Emvis. She actually coordinates with Saul Gerrera and sees a young Jyn Erso that is buying the coaxium from her. Next up, we have the whole idea of the Rebel Rising book from Beth Revis, in which Jyn Erso is being mentored by Saul Gerrera as a young girl, 16. We see a very terrible event happen where we see the extremism of Saul Gerrera when there's an entire massacre of not only just these Imperials, but some civilians along the way, for him to send a message to the galaxy. After that, we get to see him where he is currently now 5 years before the events of Rogue One. We have just seen the first meeting, at least on screen, of Luthen and Saul Gerrera. At this point, Saul Gerrera is not part of a bigger rebellion, right? We have all these different sects. We have Luthen mentioning the Separatists, and Luthen's part of his own thing. You have Mon Mothma, who's doing the political work. So basically, Luthen is trying to buy Saul Gerrera to do a mission, and Saul Gerrera is not having it. Luthen wants him to do some kind of spacecraft, some kind of work with the X-Wing, something like that. Next up, we have featured in Princess Leia of Alderaan by Claudia Gray, this moment where there is a bombing of Moff Panaka, who used to be Panaka in Episode 1, the nice Captain Guard of the Naboo. He ends up being a Moff, and he gets bombed and killed. It looks like it was maybe benthic tooth tubes that set the bomb, which of course was given order from Saul Gerrera. Next up, we get into some more animation. We have Star Wars Rebels episode Ghost of Geonosis, where Saul Gerrera is onto something. He doesn't know quite what the Empire's up to. There's some superstructures left on Coruscant. We find out the investigation at the Geonosis people were wiped out from some kind of toxic thing that, just killed off the entire population, so they couldn't talk about the construction of the Death Star. But at the end of the episode, they come away not having anything gleaned from that. And of course, Ezra's there, Sabine is there, all those characters from the Phoenix Rebels crew. And then we have another Rebels episode called In the Name of the Rebellion. This is one of those very memorable episodes, of course, because this is where we have that argument, that disagreement between Mon Mothma and between Saul Gerrera. And obviously their ideals are very different from one another, even though they are technically allies. They're almost furthest from. And then we have the discovery of this gigantic Kyber crystal that ends up being something they weren't expecting to see when they go on this mission. And finally, we have the events about Rogue One, Guardians of the Will's the young middle grade novel introduces Saul landing on Jeddah, and then of course Rogue One, we see Jyn Erso, we see Cassian Andor meeting with him, getting the information about the Death Star before he is wiped off the face of the planet by the Death Star itself. How ironic is that? Something he's been chasing for all his life is the thing that destroys him. So there you have it, guys. I think I've run through all the major events that Saul Gerrera has been in. It's crazy to think that this character from the Clone Wars made the jump to the movies and now is in the latest episode of Andor. So what do you think about the character of this Saul Gerrera? Let me know in the comment section down below. For more on Star Wars, more on Andor, you're already in the right place. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you enjoyed my content, and do hit that bell notification icon so you get my videos notified as soon as they go live. That's going to do it for me, Star. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you always. Thanks for checking out the video. Please hit that thumbs up symbol. It helps me know that I'm making content that you guys enjoy. And if you enjoyed this video, I also include 2 videos down below you guys should check out. And please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps support me, and it notifies you guys of when I get new videos up on the channel. You can also contact me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @StarRaptor.